Hello, welcome to the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. Delighted to be here again, as always. God is so good. It is exciting to see all the things that He does. You know, when we live in expectation of what God is going to do, then we see the things that God does. And then we can go back and we can recount the things that God did. And then as we are recounting those things that God did, it reminds us that He's going to do more cool things in the future and that He's doing awesome things in the present. You know, it's so important that we give thanks continually for what God has done. And it just reminds me of the children of Israel when they were in the wilderness. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them were complaining. They were just complaining. They had seemingly forgotten all that God had done by taking them out of the land of Egypt. And so they get there. Now imagine this. There's no water. There's no food. It's just desert as far as the eye can see. And what do they say? Were there not enough graves in Egypt that you should have brought us out here to kill us in the wilderness? All right. And, you know, God didn't really take, He was patient for the most part, but really it's an incredible insult. But despite all of their sullied past, we see that God made irrevocable promises to the nation of Israel. Why? Because He loved Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And to discuss this, I have a friend and author. He's a co-author with Gideon Ariel. This is Bob Odell, and he is part of one of the founding members of Root Source. And so, Bob, we're delighted to have you with us this evening.
Happy to be here again.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So you're going to be one of the speakers this coming weekend in our conference. Why should Christians stand with Israel? That's the topic, and I know you're going to be showing a number of topics. So again, you are actually in Dallas. He's going to be joining us via live stream this time. We're going to have him in person later, but for this conference, he's going to be joining us live stream, and Gideon Ariel is going to be joining us via Israel. So again, just delighted to have both of these guys. But you know, Bob, what do you think? I mean, should Christians stand with Israel? It seems kind of like a no-brainer question, and yet, as I have been promoting this conference, I've gotten a lot of negative responses from people saying, you know, those lousy Jews, oh, they're all just a bunch of fakers, you know, the modern state of Israel has no right to exist, or, you know, they're Christ deniers, Christ killers. I mean, I've gotten all kinds of comments from people suggesting that we have no obligation, no prerogative really to stand with Israel. And it's a loaded question, and it's meant to be. But you know, what is your perspective? How did you get involved with Root Source? Why is this topic so important to you?
You know, I'm thinking about your introduction about the children of Israel having this wonderful exodus, you know, and then they get into the desert and begin complaining. And you know, I'm just thinking about the nature of God, and He really is gracious. You know, when we complain, when we are off track, you know, we've been saved, we've been brought out, you know, of Egypt, but yeah, I think He's very gracious to us, and so you know, it doesn't. You know, in one sense, I can say, you know, oh, why aren't people standing with Israel more? But on the other hand, you know, I think it's a process for people, just in the sense that salvation is a process. You know, there's some things we're strong on. There's some things we're not. There's some things we've seen. There's some things we haven't seen. But certainly, seeing, you know, this idea that God has a plan for Israel. God has a purpose for Israel, and standing with Israel means standing with God's purposes. Well, that's how I look at it.
Amen. You know, we already have people in the chat room, and they're asking, what about the Palestinians? So this is a perennial question that we get anytime we talk about standing with Israel. There's a question, what about those Palestinians?
Yeah, yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, the first reaction that anybody ought to have is to love. You know, what about the Palestinians? They're people. They're wonderful people. There's many many wonderful people in the area. There have been egregious things that have been done to the Palestinians. Now, I don't think that Israel is the primary cause of that, but there's no question that the Palestinians are in a very tough spot. You know, when I talk with Jews in Israel, you know, their hearts go out. Actually, it isn't like us or versus them. You know, they even the Torah commands one to be kind to those that, even if they don't consider themselves part of the society. You know, you're to be kind. So absolutely, Palestinians are loved by God. You know, they are loved, but there is no, you know, there is no race, there is no nationality, there isn't any God-made group of people that He loves more than any other. I mean, we all have this opportunity to be loved equally before God. So, yeah.
I think that's awesome. And I think, you know, part of this, we have to go back and understand that God made promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right. And so by making it to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you know, Isaac versus Esau, right? So it excluded Esau, right? And then he made it to Jacob. That excluded, or excuse me, Jacob and Esau, right? So I'm saying Isaac and Ishmael. There we go. Sorry about that.
Yes.
All right. So, you know, so he excluded Ishmael. Now, did he make promises to bless Ishmael? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Okay. And we see even that God had blessed Esau when Jacob finally comes back to the land. I mean, Esau's a rich dude, right? Things are going pretty good for him, right? And so it's not that God is dead set against these people at all, but he made promises, and he promised the land to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then when he took the children of Israel out of Egypt, he took them to Mount Sinai. They entered into a marriage covenant, a marriage contract, and God said that he would never, ever, ever take back his love from the entire 12 tribes of Israel, despite all that they had done, despite the egregious sins that they had committed. Even in spite of all that, he would still continue to love them, and he would fulfill his promises. Now, I've actually lived in Israel. I lived there for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to know a number of Palestinians and Israeli Arabs. And the Israeli Arabs would tell me that, you know, they don't want to become part of Palestine because they believed that the government of Israel was the only democracy in the Middle East. It was a much better standard of living. All right. And they're like, you know, we want to stay here. We don't want to go and be ruled by the Palestinian government. All right. So, and, you know, anytime you have these kind of conflicts, you're going to have the national ideals, and then you're going to have the individual ideals. The average individual on both sides of the fence just wants to, you know, make a living, get married, raise a family. Those are their basic ideals. But what happens is that you have in the schools of the Palestinians, okay, in the schools, they're teaching little kids this, to hate. I mean, they're teaching them to write essays about killing. You know, they'll say Jew, bazooka, machete, okay, or suicide bomber, okay, and they have to write an essay on using those 3 vocabulary words, all right, and then they take them out and they indoctrinate them. They inculcate this hatred at the earliest of ages in these tiny innocent little children, and they're making them haters of the Jews, not because the Jews are good people or bad people, but just because they're Jews. All right, and that's a real problem, right? So let's you know, I think just to kind of address this question in the chat room, we've got to be honest about this. You have some really nice Palestinians, and you've got some lousy Israelis. Okay, those people exist, but by and large, we have a society of the Palestinians who are completely, or I should say, frequently encouraging hatred, and they're teaching it in the school system, and then they have these shows where they talk about becoming a martyr, and where they talk about killing the Jews, and this is on the lips of little kids,
Yeah.
whereas the Israelis, it's about, hey, let's see how we can help. And then you've got Israeli doctors are going in there helping Palestinian children, even though they know that by and large the Palestinians hate them, but still they go and they do a lot of humanitarian things. So I think these are the things that are often not getting seen by the media.
Right,
And
right. In Israel, when if a Jew were to happen to murder a Palestinian, I mean, there isn't celebration in the streets. There isn't, the passing out of Jewish candy into the neighborhood. They don't go and put a marker at the place where the murder happened. They don't name the square, this intersection near that horrible event. They don't name it in honor of the perpetrator. So it's just how could these things even happen? I mean, it's just our sense in the West. It's just it is beyond comprehension to live like that. But it's like you said, it starts in the school system. And I mean, the idea that to kill a Jew is something noble. It's taught from the very beginning. So this is how you can achieve glory for yourself. Kill at least one Jew before you die. It's sickening. But I personally rather talk about some other aspects of this, because there are so many different aspects to the story. But anyway, I did have to weigh in on that. It is
yeah. Well, just to underscore what you were saying, there was an Israeli who just recently was convicted of manslaughter for killing a Palestinian. So he was an Israeli soldier, and he was convicted of using unnecessary force, and he was convicted of manslaughter. Okay. Now, again, the idea of being convicted of manslaughter of killing an Israeli probably is not going to happen in the Palestinian court system. So, yeah, again, we don't want to necessarily spend the whole time. We're not trying to bash the Palestinians, but the question has come up. Okay, so we're addressing this question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, it's an important question. It is an important question because people ask about that frequently, and it's something that we just have to talk about. And it does go with the question of Israel. So go ahead.
Well, it does go with the question of Israel, and it's hard. How you talked about Ishmael. That God's choice was Isaac instead of Ishmael, and then with respect to Jacob and Esau, it was God's choice was Jacob and not Esau. But it doesn't mean that God doesn't love Ishmael and God doesn't love Esau and their generations, the generations that come from those great kingdoms, which, there are still millions, if not billions, of people that emanate from those two great men. The thing I love about God is He doesn't want any stone left unturned. It isn't that He just wants to see the Jews saved, and he will not stop working on this earth, until everybody has the opportunity, to move into the family of God, to hopefully come to the place where they can recognize the sovereignty of God. And it's almost like this Israel question is like this burr. In a way, it's a burr in the shoe. It just sort of rubs and bothers so many people. But I see it as God's providence, God's sovereignty, that's for a reason. That He chose them for a reason, not just about them, but for everyone. Somehow Esau and Ishmael are better off because God chose somebody. Now, maybe it wasn't them for certain purposes of the earth, but it doesn't have anything to do with love. It doesn't have anything to do with redemption and redemption purpose and destiny. It doesn't.
Well, these are I mean, good thoughts here. Let's move kind of toward anti-Semitism. What is that? I think there's a lot of, sometimes we might throw that word around, but what does anti-Semitism actually mean?
Well, it's a harder question. It's a tougher question than it seems. I mean, on the face of it, anti-Semitism has come to be known as any act perpetrated against the Jews for the purpose of them being who they are, Jews. Of course, anti-Semite is a larger term. Jews are Semites, but not all Semites are Jews. And originally, as I've come to study and understand, that really some of the original persecution towards Jews was towards their religion. It was, Christians versus Jews. It wasn't because they had a certain racial component. It was because of what they believed. So it's possible to be anti-Jewish. It's possible to be anti-Judaism. And not specifically anti-Semitic. But generally, all of these things are packaged together into a term that was coined about 120 years ago, I believe. And this anti-Semitism is used to, as this sort of catch-all word. But certainly Jews are not the only Semites that could be discriminated against. But that it's so predominant across the Jews that those two things just have come to attach themselves to each other.
Yeah, good point there. So, I mean, let's be honest. Israel is a pretty secular nation. Tel Aviv is arguably the homosexual capital of the world. You have a lot of weirdness going on being practiced in Israel, a lot of debauchery. Why should Christians care about Israel? I mean, what difference does this really make? They rejected Jesus. Let's move on. Why should we care?
Yeah, this whole thing about there's people can get all wrapped up into the details of what exactly is Israel, Jews, or is it everyone that lives within the borders of the nation state called Israel, including the Arabs? Are they Israelis? Many would say yes, and so that term can be sort of turned around. But I'm sorry, I lost the point that I was heading towards.
I think,
but
it's going to be amazing.
No, actually, I remembered it now. See how you helped me? So, speaking of the redemption of God, the interesting way that God moves, Israel was formed primarily by secular Jews. And we think about it. For Jews that have been studying the Torah they will tell you, Orthodox Jews will admit this readily, that the Orthodox community over the years had gotten to the point where they were waiting for the Messiah to come where they were, and that when the Messiah came, that would signal the point in which they would return to Israel. And it was the secular Jews that had this gumption, this drive, and maybe we can build a better society. Let's try to share things in common, and let's start the kibbutz movement. Let's get out of the oppressive communist regimes in Russia, and they started this whole movement back in 1878. And then the first major Aliyah wave came in 1881-82. So, but it's to their credit. And it's, for me, this is just like God. He uses the unlikely source. He uses the unlikely group often. And and so anyway, it's back to our original point. God makes certain decisions, but it's amazing how I think he loves it when people will hear him and do the right thing, even if it's for the wrong reason. So I think God does look kindly on secular Jews that return to Israel. I don't agree with everything that's believed and practiced in Israel, but overall, I think the nation state of Israel is the closest thing that we have to look at and say, this is a miracle from God. And so when I think of standing with Israel, I'm thinking of standing with those that are in the borders of that, whether they be Jew, a Christian, or Arab, or Palestinian, whatever.
Yeah, well said. Let me just share this really quick. Let's see if everybody can see that. Sometimes you have to can you guys see my screen, or do you see just a bunch of green?
I see a green.
You gotta love it. All right, let's try again. For whatever reason, that didn't take. So we will try one more time here to share this. Hope it doesn't go green this time. All right, you gotta love it. Well, okay, that's disappointing. What I'm trying to share is the conference details. People can go to thewaycongregation.com/forum, and there they can sign up for this conference. The conference is actually free. We do have a $30 recommended donation, but that's of course optional. So if you want to, if you feel you would like to help in some way, that's really too bad about my screen share. It's too bad. But again, thewaycongregation.com/forum, and there you can sign up. We're going to have some amazing speakers. Of course, Bob is one of those, but we're also going to have David Nikrutman. I'm really excited to have David join us. He's from the Center, the Christian Jewish Center for Understanding and Cooperation. He's an Orthodox Jew. He lives in Israel. He's not a Jesus believer, all right, but he's very knowledgeable about the New Testament and, of course, the Hebrew Bible, obviously. And so he basically is the executive director of that organization, and they have Christians come over a lot, and they have these great conversations, similar to what you guys do in Root Source, I believe. We're going to have also Norm France. He's with Ascension Ministries, so he's is focusing a lot on Hebrew roots or Hebrew Jewish traditions and how they can help benefit us as Christians. And then, of course, we have you and Gidon Ariel from Root Source, and you can tell us a little bit more about you guys in just a second. And then we have Stephen Atkinson. He's from the Christian Witness to Israel and North America. Now, it's interesting. I know that not everybody is going to agree with everybody else. Okay, and I even got a few emails from some of the speakers saying, this guy is going to talk. What's he going to talk about? The whole point here is that there's not only one view of what it means to stand with Israel. There's a lot of different viewpoints. And then I should say, lastly, we have William Watson. He is from Colorado Christian University, and he's going to talk about the rise of philo-Semitism after centuries of anti-Semitism. So that should really be a lot of fun. If you can join us locally, that would be great. We're going to meet at Clear Creek Church, which is at 10555 West 44th Avenue, Wheat Ridge, Colorado 80033. If you can't make it too far, if you're on the other side of the world, join us via live stream. Again, you can go to thewaycongregation.com/forum, and there you can sign up. Just go ahead and register, and it will start giving you some reminders that it's coming up. And then when we actually go live, then it will just it'll show up. It all streams one way or another through YouTube, but we have just a nice little setup. So we're really looking forward to that. So, Bob, tell us a bit about Root Source and how you got involved with that and why it means so much to you.
Yeah, well, I was, I was raised in a Christian home that was taught to respect Israel, but I never really met Jews until I started to work for a high-tech company, Motorola, in the late 80s. And then, which had a design center in Israel. So then I started going back and forth to Israel. About the year 2000, I was one of those guys who thought it might be interesting to go start a high-tech company, and sort of the entrepreneur bug sort of bit me there. Definitely not into Christian pastoring or anything like that. It was all business for me, and I was, but I did have a relationship with God, and I was asking God for direction, and but at the same time, I had my own desires. I wanted to start. I really wanted, to do the American dream thing. I wanted to start an American company, but I did want the senior leadership of this company to all be Christians. And I had this crazy idea that the company might actually do better if the senior team of Christians that formed this company could actually come together and pray together. So, and that's a little bit different in high tech, but I thought that that would be a valid goal. And I thought, if all these things are going to happen and going to go really well, then who would be a better person to lead this thing than myself? So my fourth request was that I could be CEO. And so I had this idea to do that. And, God never really spoke to me about that, never really answered that. But I could never get a company started. I was pursuing this idea for a couple of years, and the doors never opened. And I remember getting to the point one time when I was in church. I was on Sunday. I was listening to the sermon. I really was engaged with the sermon that day. It was an interesting sermon, but I got like, I felt like God spoke to me during the sermon, just like one word out of the blue, and the word was Kobe, and I knew exactly who that was. Now Kobe is a short for Jacob, so Jacoby or whatever. Jacoby short for Jacob. But in this particular case, this was the name of my boss at Motorola, who was an Israeli Jew. And, after trying all these things to try to get some company started on my own with Americans, I had this thing. I thought God might be telling me to that might be a path for getting a company started. So I prayed about it quite a bit. I talked about with my wife. We prayed together, and after a couple of weeks, we decided that I would take a risk and go talk to my boss about this idea. And I don't know if you've ever been in corporate, a corporate situation, but if you have a professional relationship with your boss often, and my boss was one of these guys. We talked work. We talked, it wasn't about, we'd come together and go, have a, the Christmas party or whatever. Yes, the Christmas party, this Jew, but we never talked about things outside of that. And in a corporate environment, I knew I was putting my career, on the line to go do this. So anyway, I approached this. I approached this my boss with this thing. I won't go into the whole story, but you wouldn't believe the reaction. It's like, oh, I can't believe you're asking me this. There's something you don't know. Like I know he says, I know I've been in Austin. This is where I lived at the time and where I still live, by the way. No, I was born in Dallas. I like Dallas, but it is Austin here. And he said, I love Austin, but I've got to get my kids back to Israel because they're getting too old enough. They've got to get into the Hebrew school or they won't be able to learn Hebrew. So I've got to move them back. And I had no idea of this. And he says, and this was a vice president at Motorola. And and he says, this is amazing that you're telling me this, because just this week, remember I prayed about it for 2 weeks before I asked him. So just this week, just a couple of days ago, I was told by the senior management that they can't find any good position for me in our center over in Israel, so they're releasing me. They're releasing me to go find another job and go do something, whatever I wanted to do. He said, I'm already getting offers to be CEO of Israeli companies, but this idea that you're bringing to me offers the possibility of doing a startup. So we did a startup, and it's called Wintegra, and we did a startup, and as I like to say, and 11 long years later, we were an overnight success. So basically we ended up looking ahead into what was going to be happening in the mobile market, and we ended up producing a series of chips that helped the cell phone providers and the equipment providers connect all their base stations to the internet. So Steve Jobs had something to say about the importance of that. So and that particular trend, he turned that whole thing on its head. So so that was a great success for us. But so I ended up working in this company for 14 years. I thought a little bit about Jacob and the 7 year thing when I think about that 14. But at some point in that time, at some point in that period of Wintegra, I remember it was about 8 years in, and we were just getting to the point where you could kind of see that things were going to go well, right? But they hadn't gone well. But you could, being in sales and marketing, you could kind of you get a sense of what may happen. But we not a full sense. And I remember God saying something to me again, 8 years in, and this time he didn't speak one word, Kobe, like he did before the company got started. But this time he spoke a sentence. In fact, it was a question. You want to know what he asked me?
Please, yes, actually, I do.
God asked me, have you ever considered that Wintegra might be practice? And, for a guy that had gone all in on this Israeli company, I finally got with the program. I gave up all the American dream stuff, and I'm working for an Israeli company. I'm working for an Israeli boss, a Jewish boss, secular Jew, but real nice guy. Still love him today. Still see him when I can. Certainly not going to be praying Christian prayers at a Jewish board meeting. That kind of stuff. So I didn't get anything that I asked for originally, but I was totally with the program. And I felt like, what, God's plan is better than my plan. His ways are higher than my way, our ways. And so I was okay with it. And by 8 years in, we could really see, this thing could really go well. And so then for God to ask me this question, have you ever considered that Wintegra might be practice? It's like, what does that mean? And I answer, I said, no, Lord. I mean, I said it out loud. I heard it in my head, and I was driving the car alone. So I said it out loud. No, Lord. It's like, wait, I thought this was your idea. This was your idea. So what do you mean? So I didn't know what that meant, but over time, it's like there was something in my heart that I could tell that was pulling me to something different. And so after 14 years, I kind of call it like a green light. It's like I got a green light from God to go do something different. And so I left. I left tech. I left it behind. And all I knew that I was going to do was I was going to take a sabbatical. And I really was not even very involved, not following Sabbath or anything like that at the time, but I was going to take a sabbatical. I took 9 months off, basically, for all the vacations I never took. So like they're all piled up. And so I took 9 months off and spent time seeking God, and just trying to figure out what he wanted, what I wanted. And it was during that year that I began to study Jewish history. I began to look at what had happened between Christians and Jews. And I've been, a Christian all my life. I've been working with Jews for 25 years. I would talk about Jesus whenever I could. I would share whatever I could for them, but I never really knew what they and their forefathers had gone through. I never really knew what my forefathers had done. And so when I came to grips with that, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but the larger stories in Israel first, one of the books we did, I think chapter 5. But anyway, I just something changed in me. It's like I suddenly realized whatever I did in the future, I wanted it to be related to Israel. And I'd like to maybe start another business sometime. But I had this idea, what about partnering with Orthodox Jews? I've been working with secular Jews. I've worked with 100 different secular Jews in Israel in business purposes. And one of them was Orthodox. And he was the guy that started talking to me about, and I could ask him questions. I could ask my dumb Christian questions, and he would sort of patiently start answering them. And out of that, in my relationship with him, he's still a friend today, I got this idea to maybe partner with Orthodox Jews. So after that 9 months was over, I got on a plane and I went to Israel. Like the day after the 9 months was over, like January 1st, I'm on a plane to Israel. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to see what God has. And, maybe I could consult with some different, I hardly knew any Orthodox Jews. How am I supposed to meet such people? I worked with secular Jews for 25 years. So the one friend I had introduced me to one guy, and then that was about it. But it turns out that I went to a Christian conference in Jerusalem at the time, and this was in 2014, a Christian conference. And that conference was a prayer conference. And I'm sorry for this long story, and apologize for the listeners, but we're almost to the end. I went to this prayer conference, and it was put on by Peter and Christine Dard, Exploits Ministry or Jerusalem Channel, great set of folks. And they put on a prayer conference where we were to go up onto the walls of Jerusalem and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And so that's cool. I went up with the group. It's about 30 Christians, 35 Christians there. And she had a guest speaker. Wasn't David DeKruitman. There's someone else who worked in this whole, I didn't know at the time, but kind of worked in this, sort of traveled in these circles of Orthodox Jews who weren't afraid to connect with Christians. And so her guest of the day was Gidon Ariel, who's now my partner and going to be on the show on Saturday. Going to speak on Saturday. So, or Sunday. Actually, I don't know when he speaks. I'll leave that
Saturday. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, he's invited, and so he's leading us in prayer. He's helping us to pray with deeper insight. What does it mean to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and all of this? And so he finishes all the stuff, and we have the prayers, and it's all great, all wonderful. And he just says, "Oh, one more thing. By the way, if I could have your attention, I just want to give one quick announcement. I had an idea just a couple of days ago, and my wife tells me this is the best idea I've ever had. How many of you Christians would be interested in learning Jewish Torah over the internet?" And there was this, like, from the 30, 35 people, there was like this gas that went over the crowd. It's like, wow, that sounds, exciting or whatever. So he says, well, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I want to get something like that started. So, so let me know if you're interested. And as soon as he said that, then I had another one of those voices where I heard something for God. And this time it was pretty clear. The words were, "That's your man." So I went up to him afterwards and said, "I'd like to be your first student. And by the way, what are you trying to do? I have some experience in starting organizations, businesses. Maybe, maybe I could help." So we had coffee and we got to know each other. And about 20 hours on the phone later, and another special meeting just to come together and go through and just cover everything from soup to nuts. We made a decision to start Root Source. And my idea was, look, this is his idea. He's CEO. I don't need to, I don't need to be a CEO. It's okay. I've gotten over that, and so his idea, he's the natural CEO. I'll just help. I can even help from behind the scenes. And he said, no, here's what I'd like to do. Yeah, I can be CEO if that's what you think is best, but why don't you be my partner? So as I think about Gidon today, I always think of him. He's the CEO, and he looks at me and he says, he's my partner. And so so we've been going for 3 years, working over the phone quite a bit. I go to Israel a lot, and we spend time together. But this Root Source idea has just sprung out of that. And Gidon will talk about it more Saturday, but just in a word, Root Source is Israeli Jews teaching Christians worldwide. It's giving Christians access to authentic Jewish teaching from Jewish instructors who realize they're teaching Christians, who you can ask questions back and forth, and they will work with you and interact with you, knowing that you're kind of coming from a different place. And nobody is here to try to debate the other or resolve who the Messiah is, but that's not a rule. It's just the culture. The culture that has been established within Root Source is just one of trying to learn. So and being willing to ask questions and interact, And so anyway, it's been great fun.
What are some of the top misunderstandings that you and Gidon have come across? Like, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that Christians may have about Judaism? That you've seen.
So when I started this process, and obviously I felt like God was calling me to this. So I didn't, all of this discussions that we had it back and forth. I kind of felt all along it was going to end up in God saying yes and confirming it. So I wasn't looking for ways to get out of it. But in the process of getting to know Gidon over the first 3 months especially, I was blown away. I was blown away by how close my evangelical Christian theology was to his Orthodox Jewish theology. And of course Jews don't really use those words of theology very much, but I was sort of brought up with this idea that the Jews are rules focused, works focused, trying to work their way to perfection and achieve salvation through it by keeping the law.
That's the same thing that I had. And that is one of those Christian misnomers that has gotten into our Christian psyche theology kind of thing. It's really weird.
And so the number one misunderstanding that I had is that Jews walk in this same holy tension that we walk in as Christians regarding faith. That there are certain promises that God's given, and we know we can count on those, but on the other hand, what happens day to day doesn't always match up with that. We have got to walk in that tension of when what we see doesn't fit with what we know to be true because God said it's true. And bridging that gap, is done by faith and by putting into the future the things that we can't figure out right now. And I was just amazed at how common that was.
Wow. It's interesting because that is the number one misconception that I had as well. And some years ago, there was this anti-missionary woman that used to call Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa, where I worked as a pastor, and she was well trained as an anti-missionary, and she would call in and basically try to stump the pastors and keep us chasing our tails. And so they gave her to me. They're like, hey, Doug, you lived in Israel. Why don't you talk to this woman, And so it actually developed a really interesting friendship. That I would never call her, but she would sometimes just call, right? And whenever she would call, I would just take the call, and we would talk. And I remember one time very specifically, I was like, you Jews are just trying to keep the law in order to earn your way to heaven or faith, favor with God. And she's like, no, we don't. I said, yes, you do. you know And she's like, no, we don't. And I'm thinking, she doesn't even know her own theology, right? I was just thinking, my goodness, this woman needs some schooling, right? And yet, the next thing that came out was, she's like, no, we don't do it because we're not trying to earn anything. We do it because God told us to. And it was at that point, it was like I hit a wall. I'm like, what did you say? Like what? You do it because God said to. I had no comeback for that. I had no theological answer. I mean, if God tells you to do something, that should be good enough, right? You shouldn't need any other reason. I mean, you may have some greater understanding later on, or this is why we do it, but the fact that God said to do it should be good enough. And I don't know how this got started, Bob, but I really think that that is probably one of the biggest misconceptions that we have as Christians. My hypothesis, it's not even a theory, but my hypothesis is that we're taking our cues from basically the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees, and we're sort of coming up with this composite image of what the bad people, because what people don't understand is that there were 7 different kinds of Pharisees, and Jesus kept bumping into some of the lesser of those 7, that were trying to do it for the wrong reasons. But there were a number of Pharisees who were doing the right things for the right reasons. And, Paul was one of those, right? I mean, he was really gung-ho about doing the right things for the right reasons. And Jesus, had to just nudge him a little bit, say, here's where you're trying to go, Paul. But, I think that is one of the major problems, is that we don't actually study Judaism for ourselves.
Yeah.
And then another is that the Talmud is this awful, wicked book that is full of satanic stuff. And I hear this, see this in comments, I hear it from people all the time, as if that the Talmud is the worst thing you could possibly imagine, and it has some bad things written about Jesus, and so therefore the entire corpus of Jewish learning is absolutely out.
Yeah. And I mean, in Root Source, we've agreed to have most of our content is coming from the Torah. Just directly. I mean, by Torah, I actually mean the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, but not just the first 5 books. But just because it's where we meet. But I remember being 2 or 3 months in with Gedon, and I'm thinking, I think I even said this to him. I predicted that we would have about 80% overlap in what you believe and what I believe. And now that we've been doing this for 3 months, I think it's 95%.
Wow.
And it's what one of the ways we started, what I asked him to do was I actually wanted to start the meetings in prayer. Remember that original request way back, in the 1990s to have meetings in prayer. So we started in prayer. So I would pray a Christian style prayer, extemporaneously. So I do, and Gedon would pray something out of the blessings, the Amidah or whatever. And with Gedon, you can't get him to pray anything without, because he's going to translate it for you to English. And when he starts translating, he starts thinking about what is the meaning, and he starts giving these explanations. And so it was really out of some of these prayers, these blessings, that he started to expand. That's how I kind of learned some of the basic beliefs, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And I was like, hey, I agree with that. I agree with that. And hey, that one, well, I never thought about that, but actually that makes sense, and I don't think it doesn't conflict with anything that I already believe. All this kind of stuff. So it was a delight.
Yeah. One of the questions, this is from Joyce Believes, She says, "Isn't the Talmud blasphemous towards our Christ?"
Well, actually, and you know, honestly, I'm not a Talmud expert. It's not a big area for me. I'll do searches on certain things, you know, certain keywords of a particular topic, but I haven't done that in 3 months probably. There's very little. The Talmud, I think the Jews were pretty smart. They just kind of moved on. They wrote very little about Christianity. They just I think, and I think you may know better than me some of the historical reasons for that in the Babylonian writings, that they were in a different group. They were allowed to be together in the Parthian Empire at that time. They were allowed to maintain their own enclave, and they just didn't need to interact with Christians that much. Mm-hmm. So there's actually very little. I think there's one page, if I recall right. A Jewish rabbi once, I remember Rabbi Beryl Wine, if I can recall his quote, in his course on 5,000 years of Jewish history, said regarding Christianity that there's one page out of, what, 100,000? Something like that.
Right, exactly. I think, see, what people, I think, don't really understand is that it's really like the Britannica Encyclopedia, or Encyclopedia Britannica. Remember, you know, those many volumes, right? We don't have those nowadays because we have computers,
yeah.
But you know, way back in the day, right, you had this you know, maybe 20, 30 sets of books, right, that had pretty much all of the general knowledge of the world. And that is what the Talmud is like. It's a huge compendium of literature. Of rabbis, many rabbis over the centuries. It starts with the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the second law, or the second giving. You know, it's this idea to say, here's what the text of the Bible says. Let's put this fence around it so that we don't trip over the text itself. And this is going to help us to actually live this out, right? So the desires, the intentions of it were very good. And so then you have that. Then you have the Gemara, and then you have the Amorim. I mean, so it just goes on. And then you have the Rashi commentary. And so out of all of that stuff, yes, you do have a handful of rabbis who have said some bad things, kind of coded about Jesus, right? But you have to understand that this is it's a discussion, right? It's not one voice. That's or right. One unified opinion about how things should be. It's a debate. That's the whole point. It's a debate.
This is one of the other major misunderstandings that I had that after working with Gedon for a few months, that became clear, is that debate is even encouraged in Judaism. It's okay. Like, there's actually more debate, more diversity of opinion within this Jewish culture than we see in denominations, because the denominations are often built around certain belief systems. You're going to be in that. You're supposed to believe these things, and but it's okay. In fact, the idea of challenging what other people might have said, or trying to see it from a different way, or why not this other way, it's the part of the learning process, which is one of the other big things that I wasn't a misunderstanding. I just had no idea that there is a certain way that Jews learn, and that way of learning is different than what we're taught in our Western culture. Our Western Greek-based culture is, we're taught to sit in a classroom and watch and listen to the one person be the oracle, and we take it in, we take our notes, and maybe answer questions later. But the Jewish style is an engagement where two people come together and try to wrestle through it, wrestle through the text and look at it from all the angles. And respectful debate is encouraged as a way to learn. So it's you know, that was one of the things that we still want to capture somehow at Root Source over the internet. Most of what we've done now is more of, you know, here's a lesson, then you can interact. So it's culturally comfortable to Christians, but it isn't the full yeshiva experience. Maybe we'll figure out a way to do that someday.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated, to be honest, over the internet. But I remember when I first went into the first time I went into a Beit Midrash, a house of study, and I was blown away by how noisy it was. I'm like,
Yes, yes.
wait a second, they're supposed to be studying, and yet it's boisterous, it's noisy in here, and that's when I realized that it was the debate, right? That they're having this text, they're going over the text, they're reading it, then they're discussing it, and they're like, wait a second, it says over here, and it says over here. Okay, now, our Christian yeshiva has basically become Facebook or YouTube comment section, right? And there people go back and forth, and unfortunately, it could get down and dirty pretty quick,
Yeah.
because you think differently, and so therefore you are anathema, and you're going to hell. I mean, very quickly people become heretics over a difference of opinion on some particular text, and that's unfortunate, because there's a lot in the Bible, and some things we just have to. I mean, really everything we have to discuss. Some things I might not want to discuss, but some things we have to take the time to discuss these. And what does the Word actually say? Let's really challenge ourselves. Let's discuss it, and let's understand it. But what I find is that people go to these crazy extremes. You're way over here, and any divergence from this point of view is absolutely heresy, and that's unfortunate. Whereas in Judaism, it's much more, let's discuss it. I mean, God even says in Isaiah, come, let us reason together. And that is really the Jewish mindset. And, so I'm completely behind what you guys are doing. I think it's so important. And, like you said, 95%, that's a pretty bold number. And it's a bold number because, before you started studying with Gidon, it sounds like, I mean, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but certainly before I, kind of was clued in, I thought that Jews were trying to earn their way to heaven, whereas we Christians were all about grace, and then I'm like, oh my goodness, I have a lot to learn. They're not trying to earn their way, at least, the average Orthodox is not. Maybe some of the uninformed are, but the average guy who knows something about the Bible, he's just trying to walk in faithfulness to what God has said to do. And that's what the average Christian is really ultimately trying to do, is to walk in faithfulness. We're appreciative of God's grace, and I think that is where some of the challenge. Now, of course, part of this other challenge that, one time we'll have you on for another show, and we'll talk about, how do Jews and Gentiles come together theologically in God's perspective, so there's a whole another story that we can talk about in there. We won't get into that tonight, but we're just about out of time. But kind of just give us a little preview of what you're going to talk about on Saturday.
Oh, great. Yeah, actually, I might even be able to pull up, well, does it really matter? I can share screen here, but I'll just show you my little graphic since I work to, can you see that? Nope,
not yet.
Maybe not. Okay, sorry, guys.
No worries. It happens. I understand. I'm just looking at some of the questions. I'm just going to answer some of these questions really quick while you're getting that. The Talmud is a commentary by men. Does it have anything good to say about our Christ or about Christians? Well, most of it is neutral. It does have a few places where it's negative, but really that is not their main focus. Not at all. I mean, the focus is, here's the Torah. What does it say? What do we understand? How do we understand it? How do we apply it to our lives? So that's really the majority of it, of what it is. And it's really not that much different than picking up some of your favorite commentaries, your Bible commentaries, and just reading them. And they're not going to have a lot to say about a lot of topics, because they're just not dealing with these other topics. They're just dealing with the text. All right, so that's essentially what the Talmud is all about. Christ is the new covenant in Isaiah 42. Give thee for a covenant for the people is the prophecy about Jesus Christ. I believe it is, yes. I definitely think it's talking about Jesus. When you're sharing Yeshua with Jewish people, it's great to have an understanding of how to reach them. to the gospel of Besor Geula. That's absolutely right. We should definitely be clued in so that we're not talking past them, we're actually talking with them. And I think much of what we do as Christians in sharing the gospel with the Jewish people, we're not listening to them. We don't even care. We're just trying to say Jesus died for your sins, and you got to believe this. And here's a ham and cheese sandwich, you know. And we're trying to change them to believe in a very different manner than what they've come up with. And you know, quite frankly, Bob, I think a lot of what we do as Christians is not making them jealous. They're not like, I don't want to believe that stuff. You know, I mean, let's think about it. You know, the average Christian message is, hey, Jesus died to free you from the law, right? He died to free you from this terrible law that you are under. And now you're free. Now you're free to have a ham and cheese sandwich. Now you're free to go work on Saturdays, right? And the Jew hears that and they're like, you know, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
is paganism. I
yeah,
want nothing to do with that. And I think this is going to require the Christian community to really to wake up to see that Jesus did not die to save anybody from God's law, right? God's law is a good thing. He came to save us from the penalty of having broken the law, but not so that we could just ditch it. You know, that's a completely different, you know, concept.
you know, it's what from the Jewish standpoint, you know, one of the things that kind of hurts. We're not going to hear it from any of Gidon or David but I've been asked this before. Is, you know, why do you Christians, why did you take Sunday as your Sabbath? You know, I mean, and it just hurts a little bit, you know, and that has been abused over the years. You know, in some societies, the law of the land was that you have to take Sunday off. No businesses should be open on Sunday, period, nationally. Now, if you want to close, of course, the Jews are going to close their businesses on Saturday too. So now they're at a significant disadvantage, trying to close 2 days a week versus the rest of the competing businesses. So I mean, it's just, you know, things like that. You don't think about the ramifications of a simple decision to shift the, you know, the Sabbath by a day. But on my screen here is, and are you still with me, Dave?
No, unfortunately, we can't see that, and I'm
You
not
can't
sure
see it?
why. You know, mine wasn't working either, so maybe there's
Okay.
do that. Though it did work pre-show. Oh, there we go. Okay,
Okay.
now I
Okay,
can
right
see
there.
myself. There we go. Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
So for Saturday, what I plan to talk about is two things. I'm going to do two shorter presentations in the slot that you've graciously given me. The first is going to be in this general theme of why stand with Israel, and I've put together a presentation. Godot and I have worked on this for a number of months. That is the 14-minute presentation that has everything that I wish I knew when I started this whole investigation, okay, on why Israel. And so that's the first thing. And then this other thing is, you know, we often in these conferences where we talk about standing with Israel, we talk about replacement theology. And I will touch on replacement theology, but I have a twist on it based on some things that I felt like God was speaking to me and about this. And so I'm going to offer a little bit different and more personal perspective on replacement theology. And so that's called the flavor of replacement. So anyway, I hope those that would like to do turn out.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to, you know, what you have to say on those two topics. That's going to be very informative. Everyone, if you haven't signed up already, again, encourage you to go to thewaycongregation.com/forum, and that will take you to the page where you can register. As I said, it is free. If you want to donate $30 or whatever, it would be great. It would definitely help to offset the costs of the conference. We're just going to use that for, you know, the costs of actually putting this together, and being able to bless our speakers a bit. So again, sign up for it. It's going to be both live, so it'll be here if you're in the Denver area. Come and join us. We look forward to meeting you. If you can't make it, join us via live stream, and we're going to have a great time. Bob's co-author is going to be joining us, Gidon Ariel. He's going to join us from Israel. And of course, also David Nekrutman, who is also from Israel. And then we have William Watson from CCU, Colorado Christian University. We have Norm Franz. We have Stephen Atkinson. So these are the people who are going to be blessing us, sharing with us, enlightening us, I hope, as to why we should stand with Israel, why Christians should stand with Israel. And I believe that we are to stand with Israel. You know, again, there's a lot that we can talk about here, right? We're both kind of biting our tongues because there's a lot more that we could say. There's a whole bunch more, okay? If you guys are interested, I did a whole PowerPoint presentation. It's on my YouTube channel. It's called The Old Covenant versus the New Covenant. It's all about God's divorce and remarriage to Israel. All right, so check that out if you want to kind of get deeper into this question. There's a lot more, and we're going to discuss that in a conference we're going to have in the summer, which is going to be all about the fullness of the Gentiles. So that'll be a lot of fun, and we'll get into some of these thornier questions. But for now, we'll just kind of leave it at that. Just a couple more questions. One guy says, Project Bass Player says, great discussion, guys. I hope there's more of this. Thank you. We appreciate that. Spread the word. Another one, Joyce asks, is it true that there is a law in Israel not to convert or preach to Jews? Well, there's a law. You cannot proselytize to someone under 18. All right, so you cannot proselytize to someone under 18. Okay, that's fair. I mean, I'm not so sure I'd want somebody proselytizing to my kids, right? That's my job as the parents, right? When they're over 18, you can say what you want, I suppose, right? But that is the law, and so you can definitely proselytize to adults, all right, but not to youth. And then in Romans 11, we are to provoke the Jews to jealousy, but today Christians have become arrogant towards the Jews, thinking it's Gentile Christianity and it's not salvation. Salvation is from the Jews. Well, you're right. We're not doing a very good job of provoking. We're more like just poking, I think. So we want to get back to provoking, and that means that we Christians need to live in accordance with what God has told us to do. Otherwise, we're not going to be provoking them at all. Well, again, you guys, everyone, thank you. Please make sure to subscribe. Would appreciate that. And I'm just going to say this. I get a lot of comments about this globe back here. If you're a flat earther, I'm sorry. I don't believe it. I'm going to keep the globe. And if you want to, unsubscribe, that's fine. I've got a lot of unsubscriptions because of flat earthers, and that's fine. But that's my position. So you can check out my other videos on that. I think the Earth is actually a sphere. But do subscribe. That'll be a lot of fun. And we're trying to get up to 20,000 plus subscribers, so that'll be awesome. And how can they also subscribe to your channel? Is that right?
Yeah, you can subscribe to the Root Source YouTube channel. Okay. We have a lot of free content that we put out every week, and there's a free newsletter. It compacts everything on the YouTube channel plus other stuff into one convenient email once a week. If you go to the root-source.com.
Awesome. root-source.com. All right. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bob. Everyone, stay in the Word. God has the answers. God is good, and God loves Israel. God bless.